Hi guys, welcome back to Daniel's Security Academy. Today in today's session I want to start a new format which is called Protocol A to Z. I know it's not very creative in terms of naming, but yeah, what I want to do is like run through different kind of protocols. I'm trying to find for every single letter one protocol we can go through which is interesting in the point of security. And for today, I took ARP, Address Translation Protocol. And you might consider ask yourself like, okay, what does ARP has to do with security? ARP is, as I said, stands for Address Translation Protocol and is the protocol used in a network world to translate the MAC address, the physical address of a computer, to the IP address of a computer. So pretty much from MAC, like I put the MAC address of my computer here, and I just came up with a fictional IP address in the private IP space. And this kind of translation back and forth is done via ARP. And you need both information to send packets between each other. So if you're on the same network, you might already know the MAC address of your destination, but if you're not on the same network, you might need to ask for it. But same time also, if it's the first time for you to connect with someone computer on your same local subnet, you might also need to ask, okay, who has this IP address, and find out the MAC address to send the packet. And this functionality is and can be found on layer 3, like routing devices, but also on layer 2 devices like switches, because this is the function you will see on both layers. And anyway, the ISO OC layer is becoming a little more like fluid. I'm not sure if fluid is the right word, but the boundaries are moving as many switches are adapting layer 3 functionalities and become layer 3 aware. So this is just for your orientation here. And an important thing which we need to know before we're going to talk about the security is that devices have an ARP cache holding entries, MAC IP address translations for example, 4 hours. This really depends on the vendor, on the system itself. So the 4 hours here is an example for Cisco routers, for example, but might be entirely different for other devices. This is just an example. And it is one of the most important fundamental network protocols we have, because without ARP we cannot communicate with each other. Without ARP we would need to have a static table per computer telling, okay, this MAC address belongs to this IP address and vice versa. So how does ARP function? We have 2 different ways of ARP. We have one, the gratuitous ARP, where someone announces his or her own IP address to MAC translation to the network. Pretty much saying, okay, hey, the IP address X is at MAC address Y. So on an example on the bottom, we have the computer on the left side saying, okay, the MAC address, which is not a valid MAC address, by the way, belongs to this IP address, and vice versa. This IP address belongs to this MAC address. And to doing so, you announce yourself onto the network, which is not necessary in most cases. So for regular computers, for example, but it is a key function, for example, for network devices or servers who are running in a failover in a high availability setup, to announce, okay, we have a failover from one device to another, your IP address is now at the MAC address XYZ. And this announces the change of the active member inside the high availability cluster. So it is there. If you do a Wireshark on a network, you will find a lot of gratuitous ARP packets, but the other way of announcing or actually finding the ARP translations is the who has broadcast. And this is pretty much a broadcast sent by someone to the entire subnet, so to the broadcast address. So it is the package. If you go to Wireshark and sniff the packets, you will find the packet saying who has ? And then followed by the IP address, and someone will respond with his or her MAC address, which is pretty much done by either the owner, but it could also be done by a network device which has an ARP table to respond to the ARP request. But mainly it is the owner of the MAC address to answer this. And after the requester has received the MAC address, it can start to send packets to the computer, server, host, whatever you are trying to reach in your local subnet. And I just see that I've done a mistake here on the bottom because both parties are using the same IP address. Just imagine on the left side it would be not 0.100 at the end, but 0.101 maybe, because you cannot have the same IP address with two different MAC addresses. Okay. So what is the problem ARP is having, and why are we talking in a security academy? So we do have the ARP poisoning or ARP spoofing attack. And since ARP is a protocol introduced in 1982, so it's 40 years till today, security was not considered back then. It was an afterthought. And therefore, everyone can send and everyone can answer ARP packets and requests, meaning that everyone can do this kind of attack. And just to clarify, ARP poisoning and ARP spoofing will be found interchangeable within the industry for the same attack. Varonis tried to put up a little bit of explanation what those single terms actually refer to, but both are referring to the same kind of attack, just in a little bit different perspective. So the ARP poisoning is about corrupting the ARP table of a victim machine, and ARP spoofing is pretty much the attacker impersonating someone. But in the end, it is the same kind of attack. So can you use both terms here? And this kind of attack has multiple types and therefore also multiple goals. And one type is the man-in-the-middle attack, where the attacker is trying to behave as the man in the middle between the host, the client, and the server, because either like he or she wants to eavesdrop on the data, or maybe do changes on the data. So, for example, if you consider the case of online banking, the attacker would intercept the request from the user sending $1,000 to a friend and changes the bank account and the routing numbers to himself, and therefore could do harm in terms of financial, but also moving away from the bank use case could also just be like a confidentiality breach, just by spying on someone. What is he actually doing in his encrypted traffic? Okay, and then we have the denial of service. So if you want a server to be not reachable anymore for anyone, you try to poison the ARP caches of other people, so they are not able to actually access this resource anymore. So if you want to make sure no one is able to access a specific site inside your network, you could just poison the ARP caches and let this IP address point to a MAC address, like either of yourself or just into the emptiness. And similar to the man-in-the-middle attack, session hijacking could be also a type of use case for an attack. So an attacker could try to pick up a session from a user and, for example, to retrieve credentials, social media cookies, all those kind of things, where you could or want to hijack a session from a user. And if you want to have a little bit more information about all of those kind of attacks and also the ARP stuff so far read here, I just also posted the link where I got the image from Varonis underneath this picture, and yeah, you will find some more information about the ARP poisoning attack. It's a good source, so make sure to check them out. And lastly, I don't only want to talk about the problems, but I also want to talk about solutions. So how can we actually secure the ARP protocol? And the problem is there is no simple way of securing the ARP protocol. There's nothing like you can turn on a feature like encrypting DNS traffic over TLS or whatever you want to use. No, there is no feature like this. But there are a few steps that can mitigate the risk, like both the likelihood and the impact of an ARP poisoning attack. And I put 5 together here, which I want to present to you. And first one sounds like a no-brainer, but segment the network properly. Make sure clients are isolated from each other if possible, or at least make the broadcast domains as small as possible. So only have, for example, if you don't want to like do a full microsegmentation, go ahead and segment printers of client networks, for example, and maybe make client networks per level or per function. There are many concepts you can run. And there's no really like standard way of how to do an IP concept in companies, but yeah, at least do some kind of segmentation. And the next one falls also into this kind of same direction. Use the network access control to validate the access to the network. This will also help you like to do like physical security, because no matter if you have physical access to LAN ports of your network, you will not gain access to the network right away. You have to pass the network access control function on the network access control server. And this will stop an outsider attacker to get at least the easy way in to your network and do this kind of ARP attack. And thirdly, I already spoke about that switches are receiving a lot more functions lately in the past years and becoming more and more also layer 3 aware, or at least aware of layer 3 functions, maybe also receiving routing functions. But the dynamic ARP inspection, DAI, is the usual name of the feature, is something which you could use on a switch level to let the switch actually validate ARP responses and ARP requests before sending it out. So by having an own ARP table and checking like, is this a valid ARP response? Does the response make sense? Does it fit to what I have in my table, and this can pretty much work against the spoofing attacks. On number 4, we have something which will not really act against the ARP attack itself, but encrypting the network traffic will reduce the usefulness of an ARP attack. So the attacker will still receive all the traffic, maybe try to session hijack, but as long as the traffic is end-to-end encrypted, the attacker cannot eavesdrop on the traffic, on the confidentiality of the packets, unless the packets are not encrypted and sent in clear text. And lastly, it's a step which I highly not recommend doing, but I still want to mention it. You can have static ARP tables, so assign MAC addresses statically to IP addresses. This might help for maybe like if you have like very important systems where you want to make sure that your packets are definitely going to this system and to not anyone else. But the network world is just changing too much, and you will probably hinder yourself with too much of effort, administratively effort, and the security gained through this step will be not as high as the effort to justify the step. And you will also have the problem, like as I said, network world is dynamic and networks are changing quite quickly sometimes, and you don't want to run into problems because you haven't changed a MAC to IP address assignment into your local ARP table. So this could be a step for like very high secure networks where everything is static and everything needs to run as perfect as possible. Yeah, might be a step, but I definitely not recommend doing this. Okay. I hope you were able to pick up something new today, or refresh your knowledge in terms of ARP. Maybe someone who's not from the network world came across ARP the first time here. Let me know what you think, if this was helpful for you, and what you think about the entire series. Protocol A to Z. The next protocol will be probably BGP for B, or maybe BPDU. There are a few options I have for the next ladder. I haven't fully decided yet which protocol I want to talk about. The next one, BGP, is definitely an important protocol to be talked about. But yeah, let me know what you think. Also, what is your take on the next protocol you want to see under B? Maybe what's your opinion? And yeah, give me some feedback. I'm looking forward to see you soon in the next video. Thank you. Take care.